Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Xaereth Prevails. Grand Arena is right around the corner and I wanted to address a few things about 5v5 that I've been thinking about and planning on, and the majority of this video is going to address what teams I want to put on defense and offense, and I do want to do some kind of a like mini practical exercise toward the end, and I'll explain what that's all about in a little bit. But first I wanted to talk about a new idea that I had for running a Darth Revan team and kind of the implications therein. I do want to point out that I'm going to be showing you guys a lot of different counters and different ways to beat different teams, but I'm not going to be showing you the specifics of each counter. I have a ton of other videos out there and a lot of resources that you guys can go check out, including my counter sheet, which is going to be linked at the bottom in the video description. And so if you guys want to check those things out, great, but this is going to be more of a strategy article, the overall strategy, not the specific tactics to beat different teams. Alright, so tell me if you can relate. You start a Darth Revan battle, your Revan is faster, you go first, Bastila goes first, and then their Marauder goes and just kills your Malak before he does like anything. Just one-shots him, gets killed, doesn't do anything, and he's just gone, and he's of no use to anyone, except for the worms, which is gross. Not to mention, we have no evidence to suggest that there are actually worms in the Star Wars universe anyways, but that's kind of beside the point. So, your Malak is dead, and that sucks, he didn't do anything, and then you end up winning your match anyways, because you're awesome, and you have a better roster, and you're more skilled than your opponent's AI. So, good job to you. Anyways, this got me to thinking, why do we actually need Malak in our roster? Why can't we just put the Sith Trooper in there instead and use Malak for something else in a different squad? You know, you could put Malak with General Grievous, just as an example. Like, no one wants to deal with that. That's annoying. And in the context of Grand Arena, you could actually really, you know, mess your opponent up a lot. So you could use your Darth Revan on offense to be able to counter your opponent's Darth Revan, and then potentially just put your Grievous team with Malak, or, you know, Night Sisters with Malak, whoever. You know, I haven't tested this yet, but, you know, I need to get my Marauder a little bit higher first. I need to get more relics, but that is something in the works, and, you know, you guys will see the results of that if you watch my Grand Arena matches. Eventually that's going to actually come into play, so keep your eye out for that. Alright, now let's jump into kind of the heart of what we're going to be talking about today. Grand Arena takes a lot of skill on the execution level, which is actually making your attacks and, you know, maximizing your banners, things like that. But there's also quite a bit of strategy and different aspects that go into defense and offense that are going to set you up for early success or failure in a match. And so, you know, we'll talk about defenses first. A question that I get asked quite a bit is what the perfect defensive setup is. And I'm like, well, if you've watched my videos, you'll know that I just don't know. I have certain setups that work better than others, but I don't know exactly what. And I don't think anyone really does, frankly. One thing I do know is that Darth Revan is really tough to take out, especially with Malak, with all of his different people. And so is General Skywalker, especially at Relic 7. And so, in my opinion, the best defense is going to include both of those teams. There's going to be other variants, of course, that are going to be successful, but overall I think that if you can afford to somehow put both of those teams on defense, you're going to be in a good place. Now, when I use the word afford, I don't mean just, you know, be able to take out most of your opponent's teams. I mean, you want to be able to full clear your opponent and be able to expect that every single match. And, you know, I've stressed that in a lot of my different things, like, you know, YouTube. I talk about in my podcast a lot of different things, like the emphasis is going to be on full clearing and having a strong enough offense. And so, you know, you can see a lot of the teams that you have to be able to counter these days in the current meta, you know, in the 5 million plus range. You know, you're not always going to run into this exact setup, of course, but you need to be able to counter a lot of these teams. So we're going to talk about different teams that you can counter these other teams with while you have Darth Revan and General Skywalker on defense. So first, let's talk a little bit about countering General Skywalker, and the primary method of countering him is going to be with Commander Luke and Chewbacca and Raid Han, and then you have two different variants of that. You can either use C-3PO and Old Ben, or you can use Stormtrooper Han and Wat Tambor to be able to counter them. Both of them are established strong counters, and both of them you really want to have a really high tenacity on Chewbacca. You can see mine is at 155%, really hard to get there, and you know, you sacrifice a little offense there, but it really pays dividends. So So we're looking at one of the counters that we have available right now. Right now, my best counter available is going to be with Old Ben and 3PO. And you know what? And really the goal here is to be able to counter General Skywalker without using a mirror match. You know, we're going into the matches with the premise that we don't have Darth Revan and we don't have General Skywalker available on offense at all. And so we need to find other teams that are going to counter these two really strong top meta teams. And Commander Luke is a great example of being able to do that. You know, and you can do it a couple different ways, like I've said before. So, you know, we beat the team, great. We don't need a General Skywalker mirror match to be able to win in Grand Arena. We can put him on defense. Now, if we can beat Darth Revan with a Padme team, then we can also put Darth Revan on defense for, you know, our goal of being able to have the best quote-unquote defense available. So, you know, it does take a lot of practice and a lot of tweaking to your squad to be able to consistently beat the top Darth Revan teams, and I'll be honest with you guys, I still haven't perfected it, but I am getting closer. Now, one thing I did want to point out is, you know, in both of the counters that I showed you guys, I was using C-3PO on both teams, and that doesn't work in Grand Arena. If we're going to have a consistent counter, we need to be able to have two separate teams. And so, you know, in the end, I'll probably end up using Stormtrooper Han plus Watt on my Commander Luke team, which frees up 3PO. Unfortunately, I'll have wasted those two Old Ben Zetas, but I'm sure I'll be able to find some way to make them relevant, or maybe he'll just rot in my roster for a long time, who knows. But that is something worth considering. You need to make sure that your teams aren't relying on, you know, double dipping for certain characters. You know, Watt could go on all of my offensive teams if I had enough copies of him, but I don't, so, you know, we got to plan accordingly. So, you know, we've got the General Skywalker and Darth Revan counter figured out. We do need a good General Grievous counter. That's a pretty prevalent and common team on defense these days. And there are actually a few different variants of General Grievous squads to be able to counter there. You know, there's the Droideka version, you know, as the 5th. You can put Watt as the 5th, or you can have BB-8 as the 5th. There's different counters for each of these. I'm going to show one of the less common versions of a counter for General Grievous, but, you know, beyond that, you do have Jedi Knight Revan. You have a Night Sisters counter, as long as your DACA is strong enough, and, you know, but this team is actually interesting. I don't think that it really works that well for my personal strategy because it requires Badstila to be available, you know, and that's kind of a deal breaker because usually she's going to be going with your Darth Revan team wherever you go. But, you know, the goal here is just to get Annihilate off on Grievous, stall him out until you get Annihilate. So, you know, easy enough here. Do it. And the interesting thing about General Grievous teams is that once he's gone, the rest of the team just kind of folds. So, you know, that is one pretty reliable way to be able to counter that specific team. You know, and the way this would work in Grand Arena, if you were to play it this way, you know, you'd need Badstila for offense with an Emperor Palpatine squad, of course, and Traya, you know, the Sith Triumvirate, and then Darth Revan could be placed on defense with, you know, the characters that you guys see here, and you know, it's not as effective, but it is still relatively effective. Like, you still need a really strong squad to be able to beat that. So, you know, just something to be thinking about. If you don't want to use the Badstila version with Emperor Palpatine to counter General Grievous, then another really effective way to counter them is with Night Sisters, and you know, we'll talk about the Imperial Troopers above in a little bit, but contrary to what I have always thought was logical, Night Sisters are actually really great counters to General Grievous squads as well. You need Old DACA to have her Zeta, and you need about 110k health, which is about Relic 3 or 4 for her. Now, this screenshot isn't especially relevant, it's 3v3, but my opponent at one point in a 3v3 match did record an attack on my Night Sisters with their Relic 7 Kenobi, among other characters, and that's my Night Sister Spirit at Relic 5, just taking out General Kenobi. Once his protection was gone, she was able to one-shot him, so pretty cool. Night Sisters can hit really, really hard, and you guys will see at least a glimmer of that once we cut to the video of Night Sisters taking on General Grievous instead of looking at my awesome screenshot. I didn't really have any good footage of my own Night Sisters countering General Grievous. I've done it a couple times at this point, but I didn't have any recorded apparently, and so I'm stealing this from my buddy Klesso, and he's got a great channel. He's got a lot of good counters. I think he just had a video come out talking about like 5 different ways to counter General Skywalker, so check that out. That'll be linked in the video description. But you can see here, Night Sisters do just fine, even with the BB-8 variant trying to derail them. One squad that I've found to be an incredibly useful tool in Grand Arena Championships is the Imperial Troopers squad. And, I won't lie, you need to have a ton of speed on them. My Colonel Stark is one of the fastest out there, actually. It's actually ranked in the top 50. It's number like 14, I believe. So you probably don't quite need that speed, but it is extremely important to have your Stark be faster than anyone else on the table. And, I won't tell you guys the exact formula to be able to set your squad up, to be able to, continue to chain the turn meter gains. That's not really the purpose of this particular video, but you can see that this Night Sisters team, which had really fast mods and was relatively strong, that there were relics on it and everything. It wasn't fully relicked. It wasn't the strongest Night Sisters team that I've beat, but you get full 60 banners almost every time. Now this Bounty Hunters team, also not the strongest Bounty Hunter squad that I've beat, but it's also extremely fast. I think the boss is naturally over 300 speed, which is pretty good. And as long as you can continue to chain the kills, then the Imperial Troopers are just going to keep going, and none of these Bounty Hunters, that's a Relic 4 Jango Fett, and he was really fast as well, none of them even got a turn. If you choose the right team, Imperial Troopers can be an incredibly efficient asset to you on offense. Now, another strong squad that you can use on offense is the Kylo Ren First Order team, and you can usually just use First Order Stormtrooper there. He's great, he's wonderful, but one really awesome thing that you can do with this squad at this point is if you take Watt on that team, then they can counter Night Sisters. There are lots of videos on that. It's a really cool thing to be able to see. And then you can see these other squads that they can be used on offense. I don't always use them on offense, but Bounty Hunters can be used to kill Night Sisters. And really the main thing that all of these teams have in common is that they're incredibly banners efficient if you play them well. So, in summary, I'm just showing you guys the top 7 teams that I think are going to be used on offense or should be used on offense. In a lot of Grand Arena Championships, that's not always going to be the case. You can see that the different things that they counter are listed here, and Imperial Troopers do have their own little section because I couldn't fit them on this page very well due to user error. So, this is basically what I'm planning on using, not exactly every single time, but it should provide a decent blueprint for you guys moving forward. And now for a practical exercise that I want to show you guys that I do every time I'm going to try a new defense. I like to kind of put it through a test before I actually move into Grand Arena, because I would need to know if I'm going to have enough offense to clear the table. And so I'll ask someone what their first 2 defensive zones are going to be, and then I'll plan on what teams I'm going to use to counter them. And then after that, they'll tell me if they, what squad they had in the back zone, so that, I'll show you guys what I'm doing. If you want, you can pause and create your own offense, just to play along. If you don't want to, that's totally fine. I'm at the 5.6 GP level, million GP level, so, I know that it's not necessarily going to be super relevant for a lot of you, but this is something that you can apply with your peers who are closer in GP to you at least. So this is my bottom zone, and you have to beat this zone to be able to see what squads are in the back. And this is all just theoretical, of course, so you need to plan on what teams you're going to have to beat. My Darth Revan is at 342 speed, and my Bastila is at 314 speed. So pretty quick, but you need to be able to determine if you can beat those squads moving into this match. And now you have my top zone, and it has a pretty standard set of teams except for maybe the Night Sisters. And my Bosk is at 305 speed, but under the Jango lead that means that he has 335 speed. So now I'm going to give you guys about 10 seconds to pause it or whatever before I reveal what the back zone is after you get through the bottom zone. And now we're going to see the bottom zone, and I've put Geonosians in the back along with General Skywalker. You can assume that he's Relic 7 or not, as is your wont. So you can see my last two zones here. What are you guys going to do to counter them? And you know that it's a fairly simple exercise. I'm not saying that it's perfect, but you know, if you can choose a few different teams or people who are going to be pretty close to the same GP level as you, you can kind of game plan and figure out what the weaknesses on your offense is going to be, and if perhaps your defense has too much good stuff in it. Anyways, I'm going to leave you guys here, so thank you guys so much for watching. Please take a look at the video description. There's a lot of different links to the different resources that I have available for you guys. I have a counter sheet for Grand Arena. I have a podcast. I'm going to be linking Kleso's YouTube channel. You know, lots of really good resources, so you know, check that out. And anyways, thank you guys one more time for watching, and remember that in all things, Xaereth prevails.